Single dad technician was invited to a gala as a joke. What his daughter said made the CEO freeze. No, 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 not today. Noah Mercer crouched under the main fire control panel in the west wing of Carrington Industries, sweat dripping down the back of his neck as the LED lights blinked red. He tightened one last screw, leaned back, and exhaled. Behind him, a security guard hovered, wide-eyed. "You just saved us a multi-million-dollar fine, man," the guard whispered. Noah stood up slowly, brushing dust off his cargo pants. "I didn't save you anything. I saved the company." Again. His tone wasn't arrogant, just tired. This was the third time in 6 months that a critical safety system had failed, and each time no one from upstairs even knew his name. Upstairs, where the ceilings were glass, the suits were tailored, and the air smelled like money and detachment. He didn't belong up there. He never had. But today, for a brief moment, Noah Mercer was the man who kept the empire from burning down. He didn't know that his quiet heroism had just landed him a front-row seat in a joke. The invitation arrived the next morning, printed on thick white cardstock embossed in gold. His daughter Mila was the one who pulled it out of their mailbox. "Whoa," she whispered, flipping it open. "Daddy, you've been invited to the Carrington Winter Gala." Noah took the envelope, reading it twice, then a third time. The words blurred slightly. "Honoring our unsung heroes," it said. Black tie, Saturday night, grand ballroom, hosted by CEO Celeste Carrington herself. It didn't sit right. "Is this real?" he muttered. Mila beamed. "It's real, if you say yes." Noah glanced at the apartment. A cracked tile in the kitchen, a flickering light bulb. His one dress shirt had a loose button. The last time he wore a tie was at his wife's funeral. He looked at Mila, 7 years old, wearing a mismatched pink sweater and galaxy-patterned leggings, clutching the envelope like it was made of diamonds. "Why do you want me to go?" he asked softly. "Because Mom said you were the bravest man she ever knew. And brave men don't hide when the world claps for them." That stopped him. He smiled, ruffled her curls. "All right, kiddo. Let's show them we clean up well." Saturday night, Carrington Grand Ballroom. The chandeliers sparkled like constellations. Tuxedos glided across polished marble floors. The room reeked of wealth and unspoken rules. And then came Noah, clean-shaven in a borrowed navy suit, one size too tight. Mila held his hand, wearing her fancy dress, a navy blue cotton thing with a tiny red bow. The room paused. A ripple of polite confusion swept through the crowd. Who let the janitor bring his kid? Celeste Carrington spotted him from across the ballroom. Her eyes narrowed. She had approved every name on the guest list, but she had not expected him to actually show up. Not him, not the maintenance man who had once fixed her private elevator without looking her in the eye. Her assistant leaned in. He accepted the invitation. "We didn't think he would." She sipped her champagne. "Apparently, we underestimated him." At that moment, the MC took the stage. Tonight, he began with a smug grin. "We honor an unexpected hero. The man who quite literally stopped this building from going up in flames. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Noah Mercer." The spotlight snapped to him. Noah blinked. Mila squeezed his hand. "Go, Dad," she whispered. He walked slowly to the stage, the only sound being the clack of his shoes against the marble. Half the room was smirking. The other half pretended to smile. He reached the mic, looked out at a sea of powerful strangers, cleared his throat. "I wasn't expecting to be here tonight. I don't think most of you were expecting me either." Polite chuckles. He tilted his head slightly. "You see, a man in a jumpsuit fixing pipes, you don't learn his name. But I've learned yours, all of them, because I've cleaned under your desks. I've mopped your boardroom floors." Silence. "I'm not here to make you uncomfortable, but maybe you should be, because the truth is this company has heroes you'll never invite to galas." He paused. "And most days I'm okay being invisible, but not when my daughter's watching." He glanced at Mila, who smiled proudly from the front row. I showed up tonight because one day she'll walk into a room like this and I want her to know she belongs. Even if no one claps, even if someone laughs, she belongs." Gasps were audible now. Some tried to clap, others just stared. From the back of the room, Celeste Carrington studied him. Not like an opponent, like a riddle. What he just said, it wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't polished, but it struck harder than any speech she'd ever given. When he stepped down, Mila ran up and hugged him. "That was awesome, Dad." He chuckled. "Did I sound brave?" "You sounded like truth." Behind the curtain, Celeste turned to her assistant. "Send someone to find out where he got that ring." "What ring?" She nodded toward Noah's hand. A thick old signet ring with a crest. The same ring her father once wore. The one that vanished the year before he died. Her voice dropped to a whisper. That ring belonged to Victor Carrington. Her assistant blinked. But how would he? Celeste's jaw tightened. Find out. Tonight. The night air outside the Carrington ballroom was sharp, but inside it was thick with perfume pretense and people pretending to be impressed. Noah returned to his seat, Mila still holding his hand like it was an anchor. His heart was still pounding, not from nerves, but from something stranger clarity. For the first time in years he'd spoken not for survival, not to be polite, but from the marrow of his own truth. Around him, polite applause faded into 1,000 sidelong glances. "Did you hear what he said?" a woman whispered behind him. "I mean, touching, but a bit dramatic for a maintenance guy," another said. Mila tilted her head and looked up at him. "Are they whispering about you or me? Both, probably." She grinned. "Then we're officially interesting." He chuckled, grateful for her presence. Mila had her mother's timing slicing through tension with a joke and a smile that could soften concrete. Meanwhile, at the far end of the ballroom, Celeste Carrington leaned against the marble railing of the mezzanine, her fingers tapping her champagne glass. The noise around her had dulled, but her focus had sharpened. She wasn't thinking about his speech. Not entirely. She was thinking about the ring. Victor Carrington's signet ring was not just jewelry. It was legacy carved with the Carrington crest passed from father to son for 3 generations. It had vanished a year before his death, and for decades no other copy was known to exist. And now it was sitting on the hand of a man who fixed pipes. Her assistant returned quietly, holding a printed report. Names Noah Mercer, 38, widowed, 1 daughter, works maintenance, no criminal record, clean as a whistle. Parents, mother Eleanor Mercer, no records on the father. Celeste's eyes narrowed. Eleanor Mercer. That name rang a bell. Victor used to have a private violin instructor named Eleanor, she murmured. He canceled her contract suddenly when I was 10. Said she moved out of state. Coincidence. Celeste shook her head. Not in this house. She didn't say more, but something shifted behind her eyes, an old memory knocking on a door she thought was sealed. Back downstairs, the Gala's momentum had picked back up. Noah was sipping water when a group of suits drifted by his table like a slow-moving storm front. One of them, a smug executive with a voice like a talk show host, stopped. "You're the speech guy," he said, offering a hand. "Jeffrey Downs, VP of Strategic Ops." Noah shook it. Noah Mercer. Mercer. Mercer Jeffrey repeated like the name was unfamiliar food in his mouth. "Hey, that was a powerful little address. Unexpected. Thanks. You should do TED Talks." From boiler room to ballroom. Has a ring to it, don't you think? Noah gave a tight smile. "I don't usually talk for attention, just oxygen." Jeffrey barked a laugh, slapped Noah's shoulder, and moved on. Mila leaned over the table. "I think that man thinks he's funny." "He thinks a lot of things," Noah replied. Suddenly, the lights dimmed slightly. The next segment was beginning Carrington's annual award montage. A massive screen came alive with dramatic music and golden lettering. Legacy through leadership. Photos of past CEOs filled the screen, each image more grandiose than the last. Then Victor Carrington's face appeared. The room broke into soft, reverent applause. but Mila leaned forward and whispered, "He looks like you." Noah froze. It was a simple observation, innocent and honest, but it hit like a lightning strike. His eyebrows, she pointed. "And your jaw. And your ears. I mean exactly." Noah glanced around, hoping no one else heard. But across the ballroom, Celeste had. She had been watching the screen too. And watching them. When she saw Mila pointing, her curiosity crystallized into something sharper. Fear. No. Something deeper. Recognition. An hour later, the gala began to thin. Suits' loosened heels came off. The true elite filtered out to private lounges upstairs where real decisions were made far from the flash of social media. Noah stood with Mila at the coat check. He looked down at her. "You all right, kiddo?" She nodded sleepily. "I liked the chocolate things with the raspberry goop inside. You mean the 12 Dudiwas truffle tartlets?" She smirked. "You didn't tell me there'd be royalty-level desserts." They both laughed. It was a moment of lightness, but Celeste watched it from a distance, unseen. Something in the way he looked at his daughter, gentle, intentional, made her throat tighten. Victor Carrington had never looked at her that way. She stepped forward before she could stop herself. Noah Mercer. He turned surprised. Mila looked up. Celeste extended her hand. "I wanted to thank you for your words, and for being brave enough to speak them in a room full of people who weren't ready to hear them." Noah hesitated, then shook her hand. "I didn't think you were listening." "I was. I listen better when people don't know I am." Mila tugged on Noah's coat. "Is she the lady on the big posters at the front?" Celeste smiled. "Yes, but I look scarier in print." Mila squinted. "A little bit." Noah groaned. "Mila." Celeste chuckled. "It's all right. She's not wrong." There was a pause, charged but not tense. Then Celeste said, "That ring you're wearing, where did you get it?" Noah glanced down. "My mother gave it to me before she passed. Said it belonged to someone who wanted to protect us once." Celeste's expression didn't move, but her voice did. "What was her name?" "Eleanor Mercer." The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Celeste spoke almost a whisper. "We should talk. Not tonight, but soon." Noah nodded once. "I think that would be good." She looked at Mila. "And next time we'll make sure the truffle tarts are unlimited." Mila gasped. "Promise Carrington's honor." Mila grinned. "Cool." Celeste turned to leave, but paused at the doorway, looking back over her shoulder. "You were wrong about one thing," she said to Noah. "Oh, you weren't invisible tonight." Then she was gone. Noah stood frozen for a moment. Mila tugged at his hand again. "Daddy." "Yeah, are we going to see her again?" Noah looked toward the now empty doorway. "I think so," he said. "And something tells me when we do nothing, we'll be the same." The Monday after the gala started like any other. Noah stood at the bathroom mirror with one foot braced on the sink, trying to tie his daughter's shoelace while brushing his teeth. Mila, standing on a stool beside him, was narrating her dream in vivid detail. And then the ice cream turned into a flying jellyfish, and it said, "You must find the missing heir, Mila." Noah spat out his toothpaste. "The missing heir." She nodded. "Very serious jellyfish." He raised an eyebrow, tugging the lace tight. "I think maybe we should cut back on the late-night raspberry truffles." Mila grinned. Too late. Across town in the penthouse suite of Carrington Tower, Celeste Carrington stood at her father's old office window, arms crossed, eyes locked on the city skyline, but her mind was far elsewhere. The file in her hand trembled slightly, even though her grip was steady. A photograph paper-clipped to the top, Eleanor Mercer, early 1980s. Violinist, instructor, independent contractor to Victor Carrington for 6 years. A note scrawled in Victor's own handwriting dated 1987 read, "EM has requested an early end to her contract. No further contact. Ensure this remains quiet." Celeste closed the file. Her chest felt hollow. All her life she had believed her father was rigid but fair, complicated but decent. But now there was too much smoke not to suspect fire. She pulled open a drawer and stared at a velvet box inside it, a perfect outline in the satin where her father's ring had once rested. It had never been found. Until now. That afternoon, fate moved quietly in the background. Celeste didn't call Noah. Not yet. Instead, she gave an instruction to one of her interns. Bring me the archived Carrington family photos. All of them, starting from 1980. The intern blinked. Any specific event? No, she said, eyes dark. I want everything. Meanwhile, Noah picked Mila up from school. Guess what she said, climbing into the car? I made a friend. That's great, Bug. She said her mom says you were very brave at the party, but also that you stirred the pot. Mila tilted her head. What does that mean? Noah chuckled. It means some people like their soup still. And I didn't. Mila thought for a second, then said, I like it when you stir. He smiled, eyes softening. Me too, kid. They stopped at the grocery store on the way home, and Mila tugged at his coat, whispering, Look, Daddy her. Noah turned and froze. There, standing by the produce section, inspecting a Honeycrisp apple as if it held government secrets, was Celeste Carrington. Out of place in a gray cashmere coat, no security, no assistant. Just her. And apples. Their eyes met. Noah raised an eyebrow. Carrington's shop for fruit. She walked over slowly, her heels tapping against the linoleum. Only when they're trying to remember how regular people live. Mila beamed. You found the tart lady. Celeste chuckled. Yes, guilty. She crouched beside Mila. I was hoping to bump into you both again. This is a convenient coincidence. Noah folded his arms. Coincidences don't usually wear $1,000 coats. Celeste stood. All right, you got me. I asked around. Found out you come here after school pickups. Noah's voice cooled. Why, I need to talk to you. About your mother. About my father. He studied her, then looked at Mila, who was now comparing plums with all the focus of a diamond grater. Walk with me, he said quietly. They moved down the cereal aisle. Celeste's voice dropped. I found a photo. From 1986. My father seated at a piano. Your mother standing beside him, hand on his shoulder. It was intimate, familiar. She paused. You said your mother gave you that ring. Before she died? Yes. Do you know who gave it to her? Noah nodded. She told me once when I was 17. Said he was someone powerful, someone who wanted to protect us but was too afraid to do it out loud. Celeste looked away as if ashamed on behalf of someone else. I think he was my father. A silence settled between them. Noah finally asked, So what? Now I don't know, she admitted. But I'd like to find out. Together. Just then, Mila returned holding 2 boxes of cereal. Okay, important, vote chocolate or marshmallow. Celeste smiled. I vote marshmallow. Good choice, Mila said, grinning. As they walked toward the checkout, Mila skipped a little and looked up at Noah. Is she coming to dinner? Noah blinked. What she knows about the ring. She has questions. We have spaghetti. It's basically fate. Celeste laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that surprised even her. Noah rubbed the back of his neck. You really don't have to. I'd like to. Celeste interrupted. If that's all right. He hesitated, then nodded. Fine. But you wash your own plate. I think I can manage that. Later that evening, in the modest 2-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of basil and home, Celeste sat at a worn wooden table with a chipped corner. Mila had set the plates and drawn name tags Noah Mila and one that read Miss C. They ate spaghetti. Mila talked non-stop. Celeste listened. At one point, Noah noticed Celeste staring at a framed photo on the wall, Eleanor Mercer in her 30s playing violin beside a young Noah holding the bow like a sword. She taught me music before she taught me anything else, he said quietly. Celeste turned. I wish I remembered more about her. I think my mom left to protect me. Not just from poverty, from scandal, from people who would have used me as a pawn. Celeste nodded slowly. Then she was braver than most people in this family. Noah looked at her. Including you. She held his gaze. I'm trying to be. After dinner, as Mila brushed her teeth, Noah walked Celeste to the door. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For not throwing me out. For letting me see who you really are. He leaned against the doorway. I've been the same person since before you knew my name. She smiled, but it was tinged with regret. And I've been wearing a name that maybe never really belonged to me. He studied her, then said gently, Your name isn't what makes you. What you do with it does. She looked up at him, eyes shining. That is a line worth remembering. And in the quiet that followed, something shifted. Not love, not yet. But a door opened, and this time neither of them closed it. The next morning, Celeste Carrington stood alone in her private archive room surrounded by ghosts in frames. The walls were lined with photographs, Carrington men shaking hands with presidents, ribbon cuttings, champagne toasts, headlines of mergers and milestones. A lifetime of legacy carefully curated to project strength, honor, control. But she wasn't looking at the glossy victories. She was holding a photo from 1985. It had been buried in a drawer labeled Private, Do Not Catalog. Victor Carrington, mid-laugh. Eleanor Mercer seated at a baby grand, her hand resting gently on his arm. Not as a tutor, not as an employee, as something else. Celeste traced the edge of the frame with her fingertip. For the first time, she allowed the question to fully take shape. Had everything she inherited been built on the erasure of someone else's truth? Later that day, she stepped into her mother's townhouse, something she hadn't done in months. Evelyn Carrington was every bit the woman she had trained Celeste to become: elegant, immovable, immune to softness. You look pale, Evelyn said without looking up from her tea. Is the stock price falling? Celeste sat opposite, her voice steady. Tell me about Eleanor Mercer. Evelyn's hand froze mid-stir. The spoon clinked once against the cup's edge. That name, she said. Where did you hear it? In my father's archives, Celeste replied, and from a man named Noah Mercer. Her mother's lips tightened. Eleanor was a phase. Your father was easily distracted. Distracted enough to give her a child? Celeste asked, eyes unwavering. Evelyn looked away, then sighed. It was a mistake, a shameful chapter. We handled it. Celeste leaned forward. Handled it how we paid her off. She left. He signed papers ensuring the child your half-brother, if you insist on calling him, that would never be part of the Carrington name. And you agreed to that. Evelyn's eyes hardened. I insisted on it. The air turned to glass between them. Celeste stood slowly. You always told me Carringtons never run from the truth. Her mother looked up cold and sharp. We don't. But we choose which truths deserve a spotlight. Celeste stepped back, her voice quiet but firm. Maybe that's why we're standing in the dark. That night, Noah found himself back on his tiny balcony nursing a cup of lukewarm tea, watching the city hum. Mila had fallen asleep early, exhausted from a day of playground diplomacy and her second spelling test. The stars were faint above the streetlights, but they were there, quiet, constant like memories that refused to be buried. He turned the ring on his finger slowly, the metal warm from his skin. When the knock came at the door, he didn't move at first, but something told him he already knew who it was. He opened the door to find Celeste standing there in a raincoat, hair damp from drizzle. No makeup, no pretense. I didn't call, she said softly. I just needed to not be in that house tonight. Noah stepped aside. Then don't be. She sat on his worn couch, knees pulled close, holding the tea he handed her like it was a lifeline. Noah sat across from her, silent. Finally she spoke. My mother knew. About your mother. About you. She orchestrated the silence. He nodded once slowly. That doesn't surprise me. She told me your mother was paid to disappear. Noah's jaw tightened. She didn't disappear. She sacrificed. Celeste looked down at her cup. I've spent my life trying to be good enough to wear a name that was never really mine. Noah leaned forward, elbows on knees. You didn't steal it, Celeste, but if you keep pretending it came without cost, you're letting the theft continue. She looked up, eyes glassy. I'm tired of pretending. A long silence stretched between them. Then, as if the weight became too much, Celeste whispered, Do you hate me for being a Carrington? Noah's voice was soft but firm. I don't hate you for the name. I'd hate you for doing nothing with it. Later, as she stood to leave, he walked her to the door. Just before she stepped out, she turned and asked, Do you think your mother ever regretted not fighting harder? He looked at her, and for a moment the pain in his eyes was unfiltered. I think she regretted trusting the wrong people to do the right thing. Celeste nodded, swallowing hard. I won't make that mistake, she said. He didn't respond, but he didn't close the door either. She stepped into the hallway and paused again. One more thing, she said, turning back. If the Carrington board finds out who you are before we've figured out how to handle this, they'll bury you. He met her gaze. Calm, resolved. I've lived buried Celeste. What scares me isn't the dirt it's not digging. Meanwhile, in a quiet conference room 3 floors below the Carrington executive suite, 2 men in suits met under low lights. His name is Mercer, one said, sliding a file across the table. The other man opened it, eyes scanning quickly. You're sure? Born 1985. Mother Eleanor Mercer, violin instructor, contracted by Victor Carrington. The dates match, and the ring. The second man closed the file fingers steepled. If this goes public, Carrington stock drops. Legacy compromised. Questions asked. A beat. What do you want us to do? The man leaned forward, voice low and cold. Nothing. Not yet. But start digging, and if he makes a move, we bury him before he buries us. Back in Noah's apartment, as he locked the door and turned off the lights, he paused to look in on Mila. She was fast asleep, one hand resting on the edge of her sketchbook. He walked over, gently pulled the blanket over her, and glanced at the open page. It was a drawing, him, Mila, and Celeste standing under a tree. 3 people. 1 shared root. He smiled softly, kissed her forehead, and whispered, Sleep tight, little truth-teller. Then he turned off the light, unaware that the shadows were already moving. The sun had barely risen, but the light in Noah's apartment already carried a strange weight, like it knew something was about to surface. He stood in his bedroom closet, staring at an old, cracked violin case on the top shelf. His mother's. He hadn't touched it since she passed, not because he didn't want to remember her, but because he remembered her too well. Every time he opened it, it was like she walked back into the room, smelling of rosemary and rosine, humming some forgotten Mozart piece as she tuned the strings of her life. Today, he opened it. Inside, nestled beside a worn velvet lining and a broken E-string, was a sealed envelope. Yellowed, addressed in his mother's handwriting, for Noah, when you are ready to know. He held it in his hand for a long time. Then carefully he peeled it open. Celeste sat alone in the Carrington archives again, surrounded by silence and shame. Stacks of photos littered the table. She'd stared at the same ones for hours. Victor, standing with political giants, cutting ribbons, shaking hands. All perfectly lit, posed, staged. But none of them looked like the man she thought he was. Her phone buzzed. A message from Noah. I need to see you. Today. It's time. She replied simply, where? They met at the conservatory on 45th, at the place where Eleanor Mercer once taught music to Carrington heirs and their reluctant children. It was closed, now condemned for renovation, the windows dust-covered and the floors cracked, but the grand piano in the corner remained like a relic left behind by history. Noah stood by it, holding the letter. Celeste stepped in slowly, her heels echoing through the empty hall. "Why here?" she asked. Noah placed the letter on the piano. "This is where my mother met your father, where they fell in love, and where she realized love wasn't enough." Celeste approached, heart pounding. He opened the letter and began reading aloud, his voice steady, but not without weight. "My Noah. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to tell you in person. I wanted to wait until you were old enough, not just in age, but in spirit. Your father was Victor Carrington. Yes, that Carrington. He loved you, in his own broken, terrified way. He wanted to claim you. He tried. But power has its own rules, and those who hold it rarely break them for love." Noah paused, swallowing. "He gave me that ring as a promise. Said it was his way of saying, 'I see you even if the world doesn't.' But promises whispered in private rarely survive in public. So I left. For you. Because I refused to let you grow up as someone's secret regret." He stopped reading. Silence hung in the air like dust motes in sunlight. Celeste reached out and gently touched the edge of the letter. She was braver than any of them. She was, Noah said, but she never stopped hoping that someone someday would tell the truth. Celeste turned to him, voice trembling. "Noah, I want to help you claim your place." He shook his head. "I don't want a throne." "Then what do you want?" He looked at her eyes raw. "I want my daughter to grow up in a world where her name doesn't determine her worth, where no one ever tells her she doesn't belong at the table." "That's it." Celeste nodded slowly. "Then we start with truth." Later that afternoon, Celeste stood in her father's office. She opened his private drawer, the one she was never allowed to touch as a child. Inside was a box of old cassettes letters and a small photo album bound in leather. The last photo, Victor holding a baby. Eleanor standing beside him, smiling not like a tutor, but like a partner. Celeste stared at it for a long moment. Her father had known. And he had chosen silence. At home that night, Noah sat beside Mila as she colored at the kitchen table. She was humming some tune only kids understand, halfway between a melody and a daydream. He placed the letter from his mother beside her sketch pad. "What's that?" she asked. "It's from Grandma. Something she wanted me to know. Is it about you?" He nodded. "And you? And where we come from?" Mila studied him. "Are we going to be okay?" Noah smiled, reached across and brushed a curl from her forehead. "We already are." She paused. "Are we still going to the library tomorrow?" He laughed. "Absolutely." "Good," she said, "because I told Miss Lorna you'd help fix the printer." Again. He sighed. "You're turning me into a pro bono repairman." "You're welcome," she said with a smirk. That night, Noah stood once again on the balcony, the city breathing softly beneath him. His phone buzzed, a message from Celeste. "I found something you need to see, but it changes everything." He stared at the screen for a moment, then replied, "So did I." Across town, in a boardroom lit only by desk lamps, 3 executives reviewed a dossier with trembling hands. "This cannot reach the press," one of them whispered. "If the bloodline is proven, he has more claim than she does." Another voice cut in cold and measured. "Then we don't let him prove it." They all looked up, and the silence that followed was not one of agreement. It was the silence before a storm. Back at the conservatory in the darkness, someone had broken in. A figure moved quietly through the hall, snapping photos of the letter left behind the violin case, the photo of Victor and Eleanor. Then, just as quietly, they slipped away, carrying the truth with them. But truth once awakened has a will of its own. The Carrington boardroom was a cathedral of glass and silence. Long mahogany table, velvet chairs. Walls that didn't echo, they absorbed. 12 executives sat in a semicircle, their faces tight with calculation. On the far wall, a flat screen displayed 2 side-by-side images, Victor Carrington holding an infant in 1985, and a recent photo of Noah Mercer standing at the Gala stage. The resemblance was undeniable. Celeste sat at the head of the table, spine straight, hands folded. "This is not a scandal," she said calmly. "It's a correction." One board member, Raymond Granger COO, gray-templed and shark-eyed, adjusted his cufflink and leaned forward. "You want us to publicly acknowledge that Carrington Industries was built in part on a lie?" Celeste's eyes didn't blink. "Yes, because it was." A murmur rippled through the room. Granger smirked. "Do you understand what this does to our stockholders? To our partners overseas?" Celeste stood slow and deliberate. "I'm not asking for your permission. I'm informing you of our moral obligation." Someone at the end of the table chuckled. "Morality doesn't trend well in quarterly reports." Celeste's voice was cold steel. "Then maybe we've been chasing the wrong metrics." That afternoon, in a quiet cafe near Central Park, Noah sat across from Celeste at a small table by the window. Mila was beside them, spooning whipped cream off a hot chocolate like it was a sacred ritual. "I think the marshmallows are too soft," she said. "They're marshmallows," Noah replied. "Exactly." Celeste smiled. "She's relentless." "She's 7, Noah said, "but she cross-examines like a Harvard litigator." Mila interrupted, waving her spoon. "You're talking like I'm not here." "We are," Celeste said, leaning in. "But we're pretending not to be intimidated." Mila grinned. "Good, you should be." Then she turned back to her cocoa, leaving the adults to their world. Celeste's face shifted. "Serious again. They're starting to move, Noah. The board. Quiet meetings. Side calls. They see you as a threat." "I figured," he said. "Legacy doesn't like to be rewritten." "It's not just you anymore," she said. "They know I'm helping you. That makes me a liability." Noah looked at her carefully. "You still want to help?" Celeste's eyes held his. "Now, more than ever." A pause. Then he asked softly why. She answered without hesitation. "Because every time I look at Mila, I see the world I want to live in. And because every time I look at you, I see the man who's already building it." Later that night, Celeste returned to Carrington Tower and found an envelope slid beneath her office door. No sender, no note. Inside, a printed photo. Blurry, but unmistakable. The conservatory, the letter, the ring. Someone had broken in. Someone was watching. The next morning, Mila stood on the school steps adjusting her backpack. "Do I have to go?" she asked. "Education is important," Noah said. "So is espionage. Can I stay and help you investigate the corporate conspiracy?" He crouched and kissed her forehead. "One of us needs to have a normal life." Mila sighed. "Fine. But if the villains show up, call me immediately." As she ran off, Celeste, waiting nearby, chuckled softly. "She's not wrong." Noah stood beside her. "I know." They walked together in silence, the kind that wasn't awkward anymore. Finally, Celeste said, "I was 8 when Victor taught me how to say, 'Carringtons never bow.' He meant it literally. Even during piano recitals. I wasn't allowed to bow at the end." Noah frowned. "Why?" "Because he said applause was a sign of weakness. That true power doesn't ask for praise, it just assumes it." Noah looked at her. "That sounds less like a father, more like a dictator." Celeste didn't argue. He believed in dominance, not connection, and I spent my whole life confusing the two. She turned to him. "But you're not trying to dominate anything. You're just trying to be enough for the people you love." He shrugged. "That's all I ever wanted." She smiled. "Then you've already done what he never could." That night, a storm rolled in. Rain tapped against Noah's windows as he and Celeste sat at his kitchen table again. Mila asleep, a half-eaten grilled cheese on the counter. Noah placed a folder on the table. "Bank records," he said. "Transfers from Carrington's private account to a shell company tied to my mother's medical care." Victor didn't abandon her completely. He paid for everything quietly. Celeste scanned the pages, her eyes widening. This proves intent, support, guilt. He nodded. It also proves that someone kept covering for him long after he died. Celeste looked up. Granger. I'd bet everything. Her jaw tightened. Then it's time we stopped playing defense. The next morning, Celeste walked into the Carrington boardroom again. But this time, she wasn't alone. She brought Noah and Mila. The room stilled. Granger rose from his chair, a tight smile on his face. What is this? Celeste stood tall. This is the truth. The one this company has tried to bury. Granger scoffed. You brought a child to a shareholders' meeting. Noah stepped forward. She's not just a child. She's his granddaughter. Gasps. Celeste laid the bank records on the table. Then the photograph. Then the letter. And finally the signet ring. This company was founded on deception, she said, but it won't move forward with it. Granger's voice trembled with barely contained rage. You don't have the authority. Celeste cut him off. I am the authority, and if the board has any sense left, they'll vote for integrity over scandal. A beat of silence. Then Mila, standing beside Noah, spoke softly. My grandma said truth is like light. You can cover it for a while, but eventually it shines through. The room fell silent, and in that moment no one saw a child. They saw the beginning of a reckoning. The fallout came quietly, not with slamming doors or raised voices, but with clipped phone calls, canceled lunches, and shareholders asking for a word that always lasted too long. Celeste could feel the temperature shifting in the executive corridors. The glances, once deferential, were now calculating, some even cold. But she had made her choice, and she was done apologizing for choosing truth over tradition. What she hadn't expected, what caught her off guard, was how heavy it felt to walk through those halls alone. That's why, on a quiet Thursday afternoon when the weight of legacy pressed a little too hard against her chest, she found herself outside the public library Mila had once mentioned just across from the park. She didn't call ahead, she didn't warn them, she just walked in. Noah stood at the far end of the children's reading room, elbow deep in a printer jam surrounded by paper that looked like it had exploded mid-confession. Mila sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, reading aloud to two younger kids like a seasoned librarian. And then she said, eyes wide for effect, the jelly bean said, "Respect is not candy, it's earned." One kid gasped, another clapped. Celeste leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, smiling despite herself. Noah looked up. His expression shifted from surprise to something gentler. You fix printers, too? Celeste asked. He held up a smudged toner cartridge. Printers, plumbing, and apparently broken billion-dollar legacies. She took a few steps forward. That one sounds like a full-time job. He glanced at her. Only if the client's willing to change. She smiled faintly, then gestured to Mila. Is this a standing performance? She comes here every Thursday. Says she's building her fan base. Mila spotted Celeste and lit up. Miss C. You came. I did, Celeste said. And I brought a bribe. She reached into her handbag and pulled out 2 ice cream cones from the gelato cart outside, each perfectly wrapped in wax paper still cold. Mila gasped. You remembered my favorite flavor. Celeste nodded. Marshmallow swirl with rainbow sprinkles. Mila took the cone reverently. You may now sit at the royal bench. They sat on a park bench just outside the library, the late afternoon sun slicing through the trees like golden lace. Mila sat between them, legs swinging, humming as she demolished her cone with joyful aggression. Celeste watched her for a while, then turned to Noah. When I was her age, she said my father gave me a stock certificate on my birthday. Framed. Noah chuckled. How sentimental. I thought it was a joke. So I laughed. He didn't. He said, Carringtons don't waste time on fairy tales. They build empires. Noah leaned back on the bench. And did you believe him? She paused. I think I wanted to. A beat. Now he asked. Celeste shook her head. Now I think he was afraid of love because it couldn't be quantified. Noah's voice softened. That's the part he got wrong. Love is the legacy. She looked at him, then really looked. He wasn't like anyone she knew. He didn't fill silence with noise or power plays. He just sat with it. Let it breathe. It was unnerving. It was comforting. It was real. As the sun dipped lower, casting everything in a warm, amber glow, Mila had started drawing on a napkin with a purple crayon she'd somehow conjured from her coat pocket. "What's that?" Celeste asked, leaning over. "It's us," Mila said simply. "3 people, 1 tree." Celeste tilted her head. "Why a tree?" Mila looked up, matter of fact. "Because trees grow better when they're together." Noah smiled. "She got that from a book about root systems." "No," Mila said. "I got that from watching you two." Celeste's breath caught. She looked away, blinking hard, the moment pressing into her chest in ways she wasn't ready for. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than usual. "Noah, why do you keep trusting me?" He thought for a long moment. Then said, "Because when someone walks back into a fire, they didn't start just to help carry out the truth. You don't question it. You honor it." She looked at him then, not as a CEO, not as a Carrington, just as a woman trying to unlearn everything she thought made her powerful. "I'm not sure I deserve that," she whispered. Noah's voice was warm. "Maybe not yet. But you're showing up. That's how it starts." As the sky turned lavender, Celeste stood to leave. Mila hugged her tightly, ice cream sticky and fearless. Celeste looked down at her. "Thank you for the drawing." "You're welcome," Mila said. "You can keep it. But if you become famous, I want royalties." Celeste laughed, and it echoed bright and unguarded. She turned to Noah, her tone soft. "Thank you for letting me into this." "You didn't ask for permission," he said. "You earned it." She nodded, then turned to walk down the path, napkin in hand, heart somehow both heavier and lighter. Noah watched her go, then looked down at Mila, who was licking the last of her cone. "You like her, don't you?" she said casually. He raised a brow. "I like a lot of people. She's different." "How so?" "She listens, like you do." Noah stared after Celeste, a slow smile touching his lips. "Yeah," he said. "She does." And for the first time in years he felt something rise quietly in his chest, not a warning, not fear, but the beginning of something. Hope. It was supposed to be a regular board update. No cameras, no press. Just the monthly executive roundtable in the Carrington Towers glass-walled war room, where decisions were typically as cold as the air conditioning and twice as sharp. But this time, things were different. Just outside the boardroom, Noah glanced at Mila. "You sure she should be in there?" Celeste nodded. "She sees the truth clearer than most adults. She's 7, and she's already braver than half the board." Mila whispered, "I brought my pictures. They're important." Celeste gave a faint smile. "They are. Because legacy isn't just built with money. It's built with what we choose to remember." Noah sighed. "Well, here goes nothing." Then the doors opened. Noah walked in beside Celeste, no suit, no tie, just his steady gait and the quiet weight of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. And with him came Mila. She wore her favorite red cardigan, clutched a folder of drawings in one hand and Noah's fingers in the other. There was peanut butter on her cheek. The room stopped breathing. Raymond Granger was the first to stand, arms crossed like a gate. "This is highly irregular," he said, tone clipped. "Bringing a child to a board meeting." "She's not just a child," Celeste interrupted, voice calm, but iron. "She's legacy." Mila looked around, eyes curious but unafraid. "Is this where the villains make all their secret plans?" she asked. A few stifled chuckles escaped from junior board members. Granger's jaw tightened. Celeste walked to the head of the table. "Today, we're going to talk about truth, about names, and about what legacy really means, not just on paper, but in people." Noah stepped forward. He placed an envelope on the table and opened it slowly, revealing the original copy of Victor Carrington's personal letter to Eleanor Mercer, alongside the ring and bank records of the secret fund Victor used to support Eleanor and their son. Gasps, shifting chairs, whispers. Granger's voice sliced through the tension. This proves nothing. This could have been doctored, forged. Mila piped up without hesitation. My dad doesn't fake things. He fixes them. The silence that followed wasn't just stunned, it was reverent. Noah looked across the table. I'm not here to claim a throne. I'm not here to fight over money buildings or headlines. I'm here because my mother never got to stand in this room. Because she was erased. He looked at Granger directly. And because people like you were paid to make sure she stayed that way. The color drained from Granger's face, but he said nothing. Celeste stepped beside Noah. My father made a mistake, a painful one, and we can't undo what was done, but we can stop protecting the lie. Another board member spoke up, an older woman named Frances Lynn. Are you proposing we rewrite the Carrington succession? No, Celeste said. I'm proposing we tell the truth, that Victor had a son, that he tried in his own broken way to support him, that we as a board buried it. She paused. And I'm proposing we name Noah Mercer as co-heir to the Carrington family legacy, not to divide power, but to restore integrity. A long silence followed. Then Mila stepped forward, slid her folder of crayon drawings onto the table, and opened it carefully. This one's my dad, she said, pointing to a stick figure fixing a leaky pipe. And this is my grandma playing the violin. She flipped the page. This one's Miss Celeste. She used to be all black and gray, but now she has colors again. More silence, but this time it was full of something electric, something real. Then came the last drawing. 3 figures under a big tree. One root connecting them all. In shaky pink letters above it, truth is what makes us grow. Celeste looked around the room. If a 7-year-old can understand legacy isn't about bloodlines and bank accounts, what excuse do we have? A beat. Frances Lynn slowly stood. I vote yes, she said. Then another. Then another. Granger remained silent, his hands clenched white around his pen. The vote passed. It was done. After the meeting, Celeste, Noah, and Mila walked out into the hallway. The tension that had hung between them for weeks finally broke, not in words, but in the way Celeste gently reached out and took Mila's hand. You're quite the boardroom negotiator, she said. Mila shrugged. I brought pictures. You brought receipts. Dad just brought the truth. Celeste laughed. Best team I've ever worked with. Then she turned to Noah. Do you know what you just did in there? He nodded. I told the truth louder than they could ignore it. Celeste looked at him for a long moment. Most people spend their lives trying to prove they belong. But you... She paused, her voice softer. You walk into rooms like you've already forgiven them for not seeing you. Noah smiled, eyes warm. That's because I stopped needing their approval the day Mila called me home. Celeste didn't reply. She just stepped a little closer. And for the first time in the hallway of the empire her father built, she didn't feel like an heir trying to maintain a name. She felt like a woman, choosing her own. That evening, they all ended up back at Noah's apartment. Grilled cheese, tomato soup, Mila's choice. She danced around the living room in socks, hair undone, singing a made-up tune called The Ballad of Truth Girl. Celeste watched from the couch, laughing until her eyes watered. You okay? Noah asked, handing her tea. She nodded. Yeah, I don't remember the last time I laughed like that. Maybe it's because you stopped performing. She looked at him. Maybe it's because I finally met someone who sees me, even when I'm not trying to be seen. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. The silence between them was full, rich, real. Mila flopped beside them on the couch, yawning dramatically. Are you two gonna kiss or what? Celeste choked on her tea. Noah turned bright red. Mila giggled. I'm just saying. There's a vibe. Noah laughed, shaking his head. Bedtime truth, girl, but I just started my encore brush. Teeth. Now. As she skipped away, Celeste looked at Noah, and in that moment, quiet, simple, full of what could be, they didn't kiss. But their eyes did. The rain had returned to New York like it had unfinished business, soft at first, then heavier, washing the streets in a slow, relentless rhythm. Celeste stood at the window of her penthouse phone in hand, voicemail blinking. Another message from Tokyo. One from Zurich. One from her mother's estate lawyer. All of them urgent. None of them mattered. Not tonight. Not after what she found in the sealed envelope beneath her father's old study chair. It was an original Carrington Family Trust Amendment dated 2 months before Victor's death. In it, he acknowledged Eleanor Mercer by name and stated that her son Noah shall inherit not my title, but the truth that title was built upon. It was signed in Victor's notoriously sharp hand, and it changed everything. Celeste sat down slowly. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from the sudden understanding that the man she had tried her whole life to impress had already known. He knew about Noah. He knew about Eleanor. And he chose silence. An hour later, she was at Noah's apartment. She didn't call. She just knocked. The door opened. He stood there, t-shirt, slightly damp hair tousled from a long day of fixing a school boiler, the kind of man who looked like home without trying. I found something, she said. Without a word, he stepped aside and let her in. They sat at his kitchen table again, just like that first night. Except this time there was no distance, no tension. Just two people breathing the same air, hearts open and unguarded. She handed him the document. He read every word in silence. Slowly, like each line had weight. When he finished, he looked up, his jaw tight. So he knew, all this time. Celeste nodded, and he still didn't say a word. Not to you, not to me. Noah set the paper down gently as if it might shatter. I don't know what's worse, he said, that he buried it, or that we kept digging for his approval long after he was gone. Celeste's voice cracked. I think I spent half my life trying to be the daughter he respected. But maybe what he respected was silence. Noah reached across the table, his fingers finding hers. You broke that silence, Celeste. You chose better. She looked at him, eyes glassy. So did you. Mila padded into the room, sleepy-eyed, dragging her favorite blanket like a royal train. You're here, she said to Celeste, blinking. I am Celeste, whispered. Is it a grown-up emergency or a grown-up feelings night? Noah chuckled. Maybe a little of both. Mila climbed into Celeste's lap without hesitation. You smell like rain and answers. Celeste smiled, pressing her cheek to Mila's hair. I hope I do. After Mila went back to bed, Noah and Celeste returned to the kitchen, silent, still holding on to something unspoken. I don't know what happens next, Celeste said finally. The board's divided. The press will come. And we've just made enemies of people who've worn Carrington loyalty like armor. Noah nodded. Yeah. But you're not alone in it anymore. She looked at him, searching his face. I don't want to be alone. Not anymore. He reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a hand-drawn sketch, 2 chairs side by side beneath a tree. The same one Mila had drawn for the boardroom meeting, but this time. One of the chairs had her name. One had his. And the third, newly added, had Celeste's. I asked her why she added your name, Noah said. What did she say? He smiled. She said, because she stayed long enough to matter. That night, they didn't kiss. They just sat together on the couch, hands lightly brushing a movie playing in the background neither of them was watching. The kind of silence that doesn't ache, it comforts. The kind of closeness that doesn't rush, it waits. And as the city exhaled in the rain outside, Celeste whispered, I used to think strength was never needing anyone. Noah turned to her, his voice low, and now she leaned her head on his shoulder. Now I know. It's letting someone see you. All the way through. The next morning, Celeste called an emergency press conference. The media flooded the Carrington lobby camera's microphones, the click of 100 curious heels. She stood at the podium with Noah beside her, dressed simply, confidently. Mila stood between them, holding both their hands. Celeste cleared her throat. My name is Celeste Carrington. I am CEO of Carrington Industries, daughter of Victor Carrington, and today I stand not as a keeper of secrets, but as a restorer of truth. The cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward. I am here to publicly acknowledge that Victor Carrington had a son, Noah Mercer, and that for years this truth was hidden, ignored, and nearly lost. Gasps rippled through the crowd. But legacy, she continued, isn't about hiding the past. It's about choosing the future. She turned slightly toward Noah. And I choose him. Noah stepped up to the mic, quiet but firm. I'm not here for revenge. I'm not here for control. I'm here because my daughter deserves to know that her name doesn't have to be loud to be worth remembering. Mila squeezed his hand, and then he added, his voice full of quiet fire. We are not the sum of who abandoned us. We are the people who stayed. Outside the building, as the press scattered, a light drizzle began to fall again. Noah looked up, then turned to Celeste. I think it's poetic, he said. What is that? It rains, every time we tell the truth. She smiled. Maybe it's not rain. Maybe it's just the world starting over. He brushed a damp curl from her cheek, and this time, without words, without permission. They kissed. Soft, real, earned. A kiss not of passion but of recognition, of two people who had finally found their way to the same truth. Together. The old Carrington estate had been silent for years. Not abandoned, just paused. The kind of stillness that settles over places when no one dares to remember. Until now. Noah stood at the rusted gates, his hand resting on the peeling ironwork. Next to him, Celeste adjusted Mila's scarf, then looked up at the mansion that had loomed over so many of her childhood memories. He never let me in the garden, she said quietly. Said it was unfinished. Noah gave a faint smile. Sounds like him. A light wind stirred the leaves on the path. Mila skipped ahead, her red coat flashing against the gray stone like a streak of defiance. Inside the estate, dust bloomed beneath their footsteps. The once grand hallways now bore the weight of secrets and silence. Noah's eyes caught glimpses of old oil portraits, Victor's face stern and commanding, as if daring anyone to challenge his legacy. And yet, here they were, breaking it open, rewriting it. They made their way to the rear garden. It was overgrown wild with vines, the outline of paths still visible beneath years of ivy. In the center stood a wrought iron bench, crooked, weather-worn, but somehow still standing. Mila ran straight to it. This is where he sat, right? She asked, turning to Celeste. Celeste nodded. Almost every weekend, he'd drink his coffee out here and sketch plans he never finished. Did he plant anything? Celeste shook her head. He said the soil wasn't ready. Noah walked slowly toward the far edge of the garden. There, hidden beneath a broken trellis, was a stone marker. Not a grave, just a plaque half covered in moss. He knelt and wiped it clean. For the roots, I never grew. V.C. Noah stared at it unmoving. Celeste came beside him. Her breath caught. I never saw this, she whispered. He never showed me. Maybe he didn't want to be seen as broken, Noah said. Maybe the garden wasn't for anyone else. She looked at him. But it was for you. He nodded. Yeah, I think. He just didn't know how to tell me. A long silence followed, thick with memory. Then Mila walked up and sat cross-legged in front of the plaque. Can I plant something here? She asked. Noah met her gaze. What do you want to plant? She pulled out a small pouch of seeds from her coat pocket. Sunflowers, Grandma used to say they reach for the light even when it's far away. Celeste smiled through the mist gathering in her eyes. They'll love it here, she said. They spent the afternoon digging in silence. Noah worked the soil while Mila placed seeds with careful hands. Celeste trimmed back the ivy, uncovering old brickwork beneath. The garden began to breathe again, slowly, shyly, as if testing whether it was safe to bloom. At one point, Mila handed Celeste a trowel. You dig, too, Miss C. Celeste hesitated. I've never gardened before. Doesn't matter, Mila said. Sometimes the best things grow from people who didn't expect them to. Later, they sat on the crooked bench. Celeste rested her head on Noah's shoulder, both of them watching Mila chase a butterfly through the half-cleared rows. She's light, Celeste whispered. Noah smiled. She is. I used to think love would weigh me down, make me weak. And now, she turned to him. Now I know it's what makes me unbreakable. Noah looked at her, his voice hushed but full. You make us stronger, Celeste. Not because of your name or your company or your father's legacy, but because you chose to see us. All of us. Celeste swallowed hard. I'm still learning. He kissed her forehead gently. So am I. As the sun began to set, casting long golden lines across the garden, Mila stood at the center of the new flower bed. She raised her arms dramatically. I hereby declare this the Garden of Second Chances. Noah laughed. That's a big name for such a small patch. Mila shrugged. Big hearts grow in small places. Celeste knelt beside her. You're full of good words today. Mila smiled. I get it from both of you. That night, as they drove away from the estate, Celeste glanced in the rear-view mirror at the iron gates slowly closing behind them. Noah noticed her expression. You okay? She nodded, slowly. For the first time, I think I am. He reached over and took her hand, and for once there were no words needed. The garden would bloom in its time, just like they did, together. The Carrington Foundation Gala shimmered beneath a canopy of golden lights. Held in the newly restored glass atrium at the top of Carrington Tower, the space had once been reserved for shareholders and power brokers. But tonight it was filled with teachers, janitors, social workers, and scholarship students. The real architects of legacy. Noah adjusted his tie nervously in the corner, standing near a tall floral arrangement that Mila had declared too fancy to touch. He scanned the crowd, elegant dresses, careful smiles, champagne flutes clinking, and felt like a misprint in a glossy magazine. You look like you're about to bolt, Celeste said, appearing beside him in a sapphire gown that made the whole room seem to dim around her. I feel like a guy who brought duct tape to a piano recital, he muttered. She smiled and straightened his lapel. You're the only one here who doesn't need polishing. Easy for you to say. You grew up in rooms like this. She met his gaze, voice gentle but sure, and I've never felt I belonged in them until tonight. The room quieted as the MC announced the keynote speaker, Mr. Noah Mercer. Noah froze for a second. Then Mila whispered behind him, Go get him, Dad. That was all he needed. He stepped onto the stage, and the city lights sprawled behind him through the glass walls, millions of tiny windows, millions of lives. Hi, he began, gripping the podium. I'm not a public speaker. I fix boilers and tuck in a 7-year-old who thinks she runs the world, which, honestly, she kind of does. Laughter. I didn't grow up with a family name that opened doors. I grew up wondering what my name meant at all. Wondering if silence was inheritance. He paused. But what I've learned is that truth is louder than legacy. That family isn't built from the top down. It's built from showing up, from seeing each other fully and staying. His eyes found Celeste in the front row, and sometimes love finds you in places you weren't looking. It shows up with scraped knees carrying a drawing of a tree and saying, Let's grow something real. The room hushed, and if you're lucky, he said softly, You listen. Thunderous applause followed. Not polite, not obligatory. Real. Earned. Later that night, Noah found himself on the rooftop garden, Mila's favorite part of the tower. She was asleep on a cushioned bench wrapped in Celeste's shawl, one hand still holding a crumpled napkin on which she'd drawn the skyline with pink hearts floating over it. Celeste joined him holding 2 mugs of cocoa instead of wine. Gala survival kit, she said. Hot cocoa at a black tie event. You are changing the culture. She leaned against the railing beside him. I was terrified tonight, she admitted. I thought, maybe people would still see me as the girl protecting a name, not choosing a future. Noah glanced at her. And then I saw you up there, speaking like every word mattered more than the room you were in. And I thought, maybe names don't matter as much as the hands we hold. He turned toward her, fully voice thick with something deeper. Celeste, I don't care if your name is Carrington or if mine was buried for decades. You make me feel like I'm more than where I came from. She looked up at him, tears brightening her eyes. And you make me feel like I can finally become who I was meant to be, not just what I inherited. They stood in silence, not because there was nothing left to say, but because the quiet belonged to them now. Mila stirred and blinked up at them. Did we win? Celeste knelt beside her. What do you think? Captain Mila sat up groggily. Well, Dad talked without sweating too much. You smiled without being scary. And I got cocoa. She yawned. Pretty sure that's a win. Noah laughed. That's my girl. Celeste kissed the top of Mila's head. What do you want to do tomorrow? She asked gently. Mila's eyes lit up, already dreaming. Can we go back to the garden? The sunflowers are gonna need singing. Singing? Celeste raised an eyebrow. They grow faster if you sing to them. Duh. Celeste smiled. Then I guess we better bring our best voices. Mila snuggled back into her seat. You two sound better together anyway. As the city faded into twinkling night and the garden waited quietly beneath the stars, Noah wrapped an arm around Celeste's waist. She leaned in without hesitation. You know, he whispered, we're not just building a life. We're repairing a legacy. She looked at him, soft but steady. No, Noah. We're creating a new one that begins with truth and grows with love. He nodded, eyes full. And laughter. And roots, she added. And home. They stood there, one former janitor, one reformed heiress, and one sleepy dreamer beneath the wide, forgiving sky. And in that moment, nothing was missing. Nothing needed rewriting. They were finally exactly where they were meant to be. Together. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below. Your voice matters here. And if stories like this help you see the beauty in the everyday, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next chapter in our journey. We're building a community that believes in love, second chances, and the quiet power of kindness. Thank you truly for spending your time with us. We're honored to be part of your day. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful. She was shivering in the rain.